last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. National Adoption Day goes off without a hitch, being promoted as the ultimate solution to the child abuse epidemic, as thousands of kids are adopted in mass celebrations all across the country, while a sudden wave of child sex abuse hysteria takes the country by storm thanks to the media's continuous bombardment of the Penn State sex abuse scandal, with CNN's morning Pop-Tart Robin Meade devoting about a third of her show to Jerry Sandusky and the allegations of sexual abuse, which Legally Kidnapped was reporting on as early as April of this year. The case is prompting many states to review their mandatory reporting laws, and U.S. Senator Bob Casey introduces legislation to make everybody a mandated reporter of every little thing. A state senator from Maryland wants to add criminal penalties to mandated abuse reporting laws for those who fail to report any little suspicion of child maltreatment. The talk show radio host apologizes for using Jerry Sandusky as a comparison to gays who adopt children during an on-air discussion of the gay adoption issue. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin wants to hang him and even offers to bring the rope. U.S. Representative and Republican presidential candidate Michelle Bachmann wants to beat him to a pulp, while she plays the foster care card as a way to propel herself to a higher moral standing than the other Republican candidates. South Park crosses the line by throwing Kenny into foster care and having the social worker tell really bad Penn State jokes. It is also revealed that the judge who freed Jerry Sandusky on an unsecured bond, as it turns out, also donated to the charity that he founded. And pedophiles continue to infiltrate respected institutions like group homes in the foster care system in their efforts to find victims. In Arizona this week, a task force of system sucks has 45 days to deliver recommendations on how to reform child protective services. And the Arizona child protective industry is looking to hire some new CPS agents for cheap. Don't bother going to Florida DCF's website to look for background information on your kid's daycare, as the state law loophole allows child care facilities to hide their violations records. And a new report by the BBC pegs Texas as leading the industrialized world in child abuse deaths. In Illinois, a change in state law will allow adoptees to obtain the names of their real parents. The Illinois Catholic Charities throws in the towel and gives up the fight to keep their adoption business running after the state chooses gays over Christians for foster care and adoption services. Catholic Charities will be phased out of the state's child welfare system by January, and presidential candidate Newt Gingrich responds to the gay adoption question by claiming that the left is trying to drive out the existence of traditional religions and use the government to repress the American people against their own values. A federal judge rules against the Oklahoma child protective industry, finding significant proof that DHS failed to adequately monitor the safety of foster kids in its care and allowing a class action lawsuit to move forward. Researchers are now saying that many American kids are being misdiagnosed with ADHD and that their sleep patterns are the culprit. In Kentucky, lawmakers are holding hearings to decide whether or not the child protective industry should release the records of children who died while under CPS watch or in their care. And a hospital in Louisiana has a new retinal scanning device used to detect the likelihood of shaken baby syndrome. During a speech, U.S. President Obama makes the statement that kids stuck in the foster care system while their immigrant parents are detained or deported is a, quote, real problem, end quote. Meanwhile, infertile wannabe parents are increasingly turning to the foster care system for your kid of their own after it becomes increasingly difficult to adopt from overseas as countries like Ethiopia tighten their rules and regulations. Experts are now saying that the American approach to dealing with sex offenders only increases the likelihood that they will reoffend when they get out of jail. And Indiana has a problem with children being sexually abused in state-run juvenile detention facilities. After a national town hall on the intersection of foster care and education, the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committees passed an amendment to ensure the educational stability of students in foster care, and officials in Washington are now tracking every little thing about your kids from kindergarten through college. In Ireland this week, the high rate of child deaths in state care is being criticized, and Justice Minister William Shatter has warned that Ireland's new mandatory reporting laws will overload the country's cash-strapped child welfare system. The government of Uzbekistan is threatening to take a foster child away from an activist as backlash for her work on human rights. And in India, many orphanages don't have and haven't even bothered to try to get any mandatory licenses. In Australia, an expert on bullying says that overprotective parents are to blame for their kids' victimizations and that children should fight back with their fists. In Canada, some Ontario foster kids are holding a public hearing on the challenges they face when they age out of foster care. In Nova Scotia, a group lobbies policymakers looking to change the way things are done in the province's child welfare system. A Canadian foster mother who was sentenced to 6 years for manslaughter for the death of a child in her care has her sentence thrown out and heads back for a third trial. Ontario police harassed Children's Aid Society protesters, and the Canadian government is spying on an advocate for Native Canadian children. In England this week, an investigation finds that police stormed a hospital to snatch a 5-day-old baby from her Nigerian parents, and that the Haringey Council's reasonable efforts to reunite her and her 5 siblings with parents have failed. British child trafficking victims are complaining about being treated with suspicion by social workers. The Children's Society is upset that only a small portion of the thousands of kids who run away each year are ever reported as missing. Infertile British couples who want to adopt are being forced to go overseas after being denied by the child protective industry for what they're calling lame reasons such as being too white, too southern, or the wrong ethnic mix. And a judge rules against the politically correct anti-abuse mob and allows children to keep taking part in the sport of cage fighting. In entertainment news this week, police launch a manhunt for a party of 5-star Jeremy London after the mother of his child accuses him of domestic violence, and comedian Cat Williams loses custody of his 8-year-old adopted daughter to the mother. We have a caller. Hello.
Hi, baby LK.
Hi, who's this?
This is Beverly Tran.
Hi, Miss Tran, what can I do for you?
Did you know Medicaid fraud in child welfare has never been looked into? The Medicaid fraud control units of the state's Attorney General's office don't want to do anything about it.
Yeah, well, what's that got to do with me?
Each year, millions of dollars are fraudulently billed in the name of the best interest of the child. Sometimes there's double billing, triple billing, phantom billing, and kitty kickback. And it affects you because you, the taxpayer, pay for it.
So is there any place we can go to get more information on this?
To find more information about Medicaid fraud and child welfare, just go to BeverlyTran.com.
Alright, I'll be sure everybody knows. Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
In Michigan, a 23-year-old man is accused of sexually abusing the 7-year-old daughter of his former foster brother. The foster father from Maryland gets 20 years for sexual abuse. A New York woman is arrested for calling in a false report of child abuse against her grandchildren. In South Carolina, a foster kid recalls an uncomfortable night watching pornography with the foster parent who molested him. A former high school principal from Indiana wants his failure to report child abuse charge tossed. And in Texas, a child psychologist at a state-run hospital for the mentally ill is fired after allegations of sexual abuse against him surface. In Arkansas, the child protective industry gives one last push to get a 17-year-old adopted out before the state kicks her out on her ass on her 18th birthday. In California, a cop who was fired for mishandling sex abuse cases gets her badge back after the state took too long to build a case against her. In Florida, a judge wrongfully calls a man who was busted for driving without a license a sexual predator and accuses his 20-something pregnant girlfriend of being 15 or 16. And in Kentucky, a judge rules that social workers failed to protect a little girl who was fatally beaten by her 17-year-old adopted brother. The daughter of a Texas judge who was caught on video beating her with a belt wants the statute of limitation on child abuse prosecution to be extended. And that same judge loses the right to see his younger daughter after his ex files for a protection from abuse order claiming that he abused her too. An adoptive parent from Texas is upset after her 5-year-old kid gets her ears pierced at a daycare without her permission. And a Texas group works to raise funds for the funeral of a foster kid who committed suicide in the system because the state won't put up the necessary funds for a proper funeral and burial. The parents of little Adolf Hitler Campbell have another baby which is promptly snatched by the New Jersey CPS agents right from the maternity ward. In North Carolina, a 14-year-old girl runs away from a foster home. A New York appeals court rules that a family court order directing a teenage girl to undergo a forensic medical examination for additional proof of sexual abuse violated the girl's protection against unreasonable search. And finally, tonight, 16 New York CPS agents have been suspended for snooping on the files of a co-worker who was accused of marijuana possession and child endangerment. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.